Good evening. Welcome to Prophecy for the Last Hour, and this is session number 24. It's hard for me to believe, but that's the number. And it's a beautiful, beautiful time of the year. We're having great weather, and it's a 10. But here I am in the studio doing this tonight. And I kind of have this teaching and information that I want to disseminate. And it's kind of hard, heavy on my heart right now, because I feel sometimes I have so much information in my head now. It's hard for me to kind of dialogue with people sometimes because we're not on the same level. I kind of have, so whatever. You might find things I say that are kind of like really out there, like woo, or some people are really tracking and listening to this dialogue and trying to glean information from others. We're kind of, feel we're on a journey of kind of unpacking, unsealing information, prophecy that has been sealed up till the last time. So so if I lose you, I hope you'll come back. Now, one of my big things in talking with people, though, and this is my problem too, because I have this exact problem, and I am on a huge learning curve. But because of the way we're educated today, which is very different from the way even 100 years ago, even way back, especially in the classical times, we don't have anymore what is called a classical education. And this is something that is really a detriment, because there's so much information that we don't really have in which to assess the events that are going on around us. Now, of course, hey, everybody's watching. I'm a Christian. I believe that Yahushua, Jesus Christ, is the one and only name under heaven given. So my, some people would say my box is very small. Well, yes, okay, I have sort of made my worldview pretty apparent. But because we don't have this classical information, and because our culture has become so biblically illiterate, most people, and this wasn't always the case, we just don't have information we need to process. Again, I think I said that what's coming at us. All the early histories, if you had a class, you studied Greek, you studied Roman histories, you studied the ancients, you studied Plato and Aristotle, you kind of knew what the other worldviews out there. You had an understanding of the other religions. And there was this common thread of understanding, and we have none of that today. The legends, most people were very steeped in understanding the legends of the world, the creation myths, the different, the mythologies, the histories. There's a lot of books and texts that people used to read and that we don't really read anymore. They're not on anyone's radar per se. And then there's a whole series of works that are coming back to us that really for 2,000, some of the Dead Sea Scrolls for like 2,300 years have really not been available. So this is quite a learning curve. But the biblically illiterate part is really difficult because a lot people used to read their Bibles more, just read it for literature, read it for history, read it for entertainment, read it for knowledge, and of course read it for spiritual insight. Now that is really true. This nation printed the Bible as the primer, the first primer in which all the kids learned to read. I mean, they believed in it for all those reasons, as history, as literature, as a great tool for learning and for information, because we were founded, the God that founded this nation, that the people that founded this nation believed that Yahweh, Jesus really, and I use the Hebrew names because the more I study this thing, and this is another thing that we've lost, that our Hebraic roots. We've lost sort of a little bit of where we have come from, that the storyline really hasn't changed, and really the players haven't changed. We think they have, but they really haven't. So this puts us at a detriment. And all of history, and this is my personal opinion, this is a lot of people's personal opinion, and I would agree with it, that all history, most history now, has been kind of rewritten from before Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, 350 BC. So you had about 3,000, my math is so bad right now, doing it quickly, 3,500 years of history before that. Okay, and now we don't, what was going on in the world from the time of Adam through the flood up to Abraham, to the calling of the nation of Israel, on up to Alexander the Great and why his invasion into the territories of Palestine was such a big deal. We've kind of lost, and they've rewritten a lot of it and hidden, in my opinion, a lot of that history because evolution came in. Of course, evolution, if you're coming from apes, the way the ancients viewed the world, because they were closer to it, they didn't come from apes. We did not come from apes in the ancient worldview. Let me just tell you that. Oh my gosh, right up front. Now what we're getting kind of on the radar of everybody is a new kind of concept, because apes isn't really going to cut the mustard much longer, is in favor of now of what's called, excuse me, alien seeding. There's a TV show out called Ancient Aliens, and they're kind of repackaging a lot of the ancient histories and mythologies, but they're giving it a spin. And this spin is that these aliens, which the Bible's very clear about what they are, and I will tell you, were our progenitors, were what seeded the human race, the different races. So it's another repackaging going on. But we're clueless to all this. Plus you throw in the movies today, the books being written today, a lot of things, and people have and the games the kids are playing today have no concept that this is the ancient world, a lot of it, the pre-flood world repackaged and just being put out there, and people are consuming it and thinking that that it's just a game, or even worse, following that trail, and then you'll end up opening all sorts of kind of Pandora boxes through that one. But so this is a problem, but whatever. I'm not going to do about it. One of the main things, and this is what I want to kind of talk about today, on the flip side is, though, that none of this is taking God by surprise, and this is a lot of what you'll hear, like the verses, there's a lot of them. I read a lot of texts, biblical text, that, in the last days, people will be, there'll be a lot of bad fruit in the last days. And a lot of that is because of this narrowing down of this window of understanding of the worldview that's going on. And so people are just acting completely lawlessly. They just have no context. So there's a context for those verses. And what I'm even saying is we don't even have the context for those verses. But what things I want to kind of jump off tonight after I've said all that is that there's this huge disconnect. Well, in the Bible prophecies really state, though, that in the last days, information will come back, understanding will come back, everything that's hidden will be come into the light, all understanding and knowledge will be restored, and what's really been going on behind the veil will become, and it's happening, and there's a lot of people that are tracking it. One of the texts I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I went to this really interesting conference in our area that was sponsored by the 3 major Jewish synagogues in our area, and it was perfectly endorsed. They brought this gentleman in, and it was very well done, and I went to quite a few of the sessions, but it was a gentleman who is translating the Kabbalah, which is ancient Jewish mystical writings, into English for the first time. Parts of it has been translated, but never the whole work, and it's just huge, and it's very extensive, and he's a linguist in Hebrew and Aramaic and ancient languages, and so he is doing this, and he was talking about it, but one of the reasons he did this, and he said this right up front, is because there's this sense, this understanding that it is time for the Kabbalah to become forward and to be taught and people to be understanding what it's all about, because it was always really a very esoteric work that was really only read, understood by a very, very small group of people, even in the Jewish community, just really sages, people really steeped in Torah. But now you can read on the internet, anybody can, but it's not as easy as it sounds, because again, it's a mystical work, which means it's an apocryphal work, which means a lot of its understanding is sort of like an encrypted. And one of the biggest things going on today among people who are trying to crack the code. What were these people saying? Because I'm convinced that the words that were used by the prophets for different things, Jesus even said, look, I'm going to talk to them in parables. They just don't get it. So a lot of times the real meaning is couched in parabolic language, and unless you understand what the parabolic language is, it's right over your head. So let me just read this little thing. This is interesting about the Kabbalah. It says here that there are 5 stages of Kabbalah that constitute an unfolding of the Jewish consciousness, or their worldview, how they understand God and what's going on. We find in the prophets that real prophecy, because if you've been following really closely, and it says it over in Isaiah, it says it in Jeremiah, I could pull out 15 scriptures that say that the lying pen of the scribes, that we have had a bit of a propaganda war going on even within God's chosen group of people, and that includes the Christians. Not all information gets to us, depending on what group you're in. Jewish people, but anyway, so the prophets of the real prophecy will return to the Jewish people just before the final redemption, which is where we are. Essentially, this is not only a sign of the coming redemption, it is also a prerequisite. As we mentioned in the beginning, Kabbalah is actually the unification of wisdom and prophecy and is what prepares the Jewish people for the return of prophecy. And this is an understanding these two words, and I've gone over this before, wisdom and prophecy. They are the words Sophia and Gnosis. They are kind of two sides of the same coin. Paul says, get wisdom, get understanding. It says in the Proverbs, get understanding. It is the most important virtue, so to speak, that the ancient world, that is a student of the Torah that you could get and understand. It means really what is really going on. So the creation, the storyline according to the Kabbalistic worldview is what is interesting, because actually today there is this coming together, this understanding now. Well, let me just say this one thing, because this is something, I can't prove this, whatever. This is sort of an opinion I have. But I do think that at the time of Babel, when all the languages were confounded, and there's a lot more information in text, like you should read the book of Jasher, there's a lot more information what was going on, why the languages were confounded and what that really meant. We always take it on a very superficial level that the languages, like everybody started speaking English or German, or I mean just all these different languages that we have today, but I think it's a little deeper. There's something a little more going on here. Because it says that if something wasn't done, there was nothing that these people could not do. Now that's a pretty awesome statement. We thought God was the only one who you could say that about, where there's nothing he can't do. With God, nothing is impossible. Here, all of a sudden, the statement's being made that a group of people, so if something happens, there's nothing they can't do. With them, nothing is impossible. So you have to ask yourself, so there's something else going on here, a little deeper. But language, by definition, one definition is the system of words or signs that people use to express thoughts and feelings. We talk, we speak, we have words, if I'm cold or if I'm not happy, those are expressing thoughts and feelings. But another definition is like words of a particular kind. In other words, words, speech, I won't go there yet. Words and speech express information. It's how we communicate. Today, people will, if they look at, this is said a lot in our corporation, especially in the scientific community, one of the, criticisms you could say, which wasn't always the case. That's why we live in a time where it's great specification. People are specialists in just their kind of field. You're a microbiologist, and that's kind of your world, and you don't really have a big grasping worldview of what everybody else is doing in your field of speciality. That's what you can do. Versus a classical education where you would have had much more understanding of all the different strains of information that were out there. This specification or specificiation that's going on today, to me, is a little bit of the cure, or a little bit of the confounding of the communication systems. In other words, sometimes we talk to people, and I had the experience, we don't know what, it's like you're talking to somebody, you're talking a different language. You can't communicate. I'm using words, and we're obviously not getting on the same page about this thing. And this has always been a real problem when you're talking with science versus religion. It's like it always comes down to, well, you're obviously from two different planets. There's just can't seem to mesh the two worlds views together. But see, that is part of the confounding of the languages, in my opinion, in this sense that, but now it's time. Kabbalah, in understanding of the world and how God created it, is coming into understanding, and they're finding out, quantum physics, they're almost talking the same language. I mean, if you can really track this thing, they're really saying the same kind of worldview. So we're getting back to a place where maybe we can start to put these things together. I mean, like math is a language. I cannot speak that language. Oh my gosh. My kids can, and I have a son who can, and I know people who can. I know people who think in math. There are people, music is a language. I know people who just, they think music. They can, in their mind, they can hear it, they can think it, they can compose it, they can put it together, and it's like, now I'm an artist, and I know my language a lot of times is trying to express beauty, and I can see it. I really can see and other people don't see what I see. It's obvious. I look at mine and say, your socks don't match. How can you not see that? Some people they're oblivious to it. So these are all different ways in which we commute, and that we're trying to express something that we have. Because, I think we're all made in the image of God. We're not all, all right, so now we're going to get into Kabbalah and what they're saying, because we're not all the same. I just don't want to lose anybody, so sometimes I feel like I have to pull back and say that after I've given a little more information. So anyways, there's this huge disconnect, and this is the problem, between physics and what's called an anthromorphic. Religion is often accused of being, or spiritual, of being very anthropomorphic, putting human characteristics on things, like God, who is spirit, and then all of a sudden you put all these human type of characteristics on him. Somehow it's well, how can you do that? And so sometimes there's no dialogue. It shuts down the dialogue sometimes between the two groups. But it's like the poet trying to express emotion, trying to express something that we know we're all feeling and experiencing on the inside. And then lo and behold, today they come along and they can find out, they know that in the brain, emotions are real. If we could have it, we could put them under a microscope. These things are not figments of our imagination. They're actually real things out there. So in a Kabbalah understanding, and this is the Hebraic understanding that they have brought to the table, which lo and behold, because I do believe that Hebrew is, let me say this other thing, that Hebrew, I agree with Paul in Romans, that the Jews today really have kept the covenants, the promises, the teachings. They have, the patriarchs are there. This whole time, this whole history, while the rest of the world has just gone crazy with other worldviews, I believe the Jews really have kept alive writings which have really come down from Adam all the way through, that are giving a correct, or as correct as we can have at this time, understanding of the worldview that God would have for us. So in a Kabbalistic worldview, God is an emanation, which they're finding. Okay, just let me read this to this. I'm going to try to flip back and forth between an anthropomorphic understanding and a physics, because I believe that physics is everything. Physics, we live in a world that runs on physics. I also believe that the spiritual world, the supernatural world, which I believe in, absolutely, supra, above the natural, there are other things going on, even though just because I can't see it. My physical eyes and the testimony of this human race is there's something else going on. There's too many cultures around the world, everybody. Anyways, this disconnect between the anthropomorphic and the physics, we're going to have to figure out how to speak a common language to each other, and it's going to happen. But when you get down to, so let me talk about this. The creation by the Hebrew God was by a process called emanation. God, the source of all energy, was the designer and creator of all created beings. What were these created beings? They were lesser forms of energy that were made in spirit form, spirit material form, and material form. They can be visualized as a gradation of energy from the source of energy of infinite vibrational frequency to slower and slower energy beings. Now, this idea, we get into this idea of the Big Bang, and God spoke, and everything that was ever needed, and this is an emanation. Okay, God is beyond the emanation, but he created a whole cosmos full of all sorts of things. And it says here, the source of all energy. And these are some things, if you're in, so let me try to give this, when Jesus says that, he's the Alpha and the Omega, he is the beginning and the end, these things have such deep, in mind, physics to them, okay? He's not just an intellectual understanding. When he says, it says that we live in God, we live and move and have our being. Again, it's not an intellectual concept, there are physics to this thing. And this is called, God as an emanation is called Ensof. And I have to say that, I don't know why this stuff is just, I'm all over this stuff all the time. I haven't been ever since a little girl. One of my earliest experiences, mystical experiences, of which I have had a few. And it was interesting when I was in the Kabbalah meetings, I was like, oh my gosh, God, this is the first time you ever revealed yourself to me was as Ensof, as the and these are kind of the creator God who holds all things together. It says that in him, he holds all things together. I was playing and I picked up a twig or something and I broke it and I started thinking and I could tell it was mystical. Mystical means it was sort of like, this was not normal thinking for a little, 6-year-old. I just had this deep sense of like, wow, I can't break this. I can't break God. He's in everything. You can't remove him. He's beyond finding out. And I can't remember, just this sense of awe of like, oh my gosh, this thing is just amazing and it's everywhere. And that God, you can't separate him from his creation. He is his creation. He's outside of his creation. These are things philosophers, everybody tries to like think about, but these are really deep truths. But in the physics of the thing, they're finding out that there really is, at the bottom of everything, something that's holding it all together. There really is, and they even call it the God particle now, that there's something there, and they're crazily trying to crack or get down to the God particle. Now, the flip side of this whole thing is I think we're in a war. I think the enemy is really trying to stop some prophetic things that God has said are going to happen. I'm sorry, he's going to get judged, and you just can't stop it, but whatever. So God he is the ultimate power. He is the source, but he's the beginning and the end, and in him we move and live and have our being. Now, if you study, and again in the Kabbalah, there are different, the first emanations of God, he made three, the first things to manifest. And it's hard to, because a lot of the text, they used, again, different words to express, but a lot of time you get with what's the crown, you get three things, and these are the three primordial, the firstborn. Jesus is called the firstborn over all creation. Well, what does that mean? That's just a nice little phrase. This is what the ancients understood, and this is the truth that has been stolen from us by what are called fallen angels, the watcher angels, the new aliens that they're trying to tell everybody that they are, this worldview that this is why there's one God. There is not many gods, multiple gods, that like all on a level playing field running the show here. There is one God at the top running the show, and there is rebellion in the whole thing. This is another part of the storyline that's running through this whole thing. But you have three things. You have the Spirit, the voice, and the Word. If you read Genesis closely, and they're all connected. This is where we get the concept of the Trinity. Some of these deep things that people, especially us Gentile Christians at the end of the age, trying to argue about the Trinity, when we really have no concept of what we're really talking about. These are deep concepts that really have their roots in a lot of the Hebraic understanding of God, how he explained himself through the prophets. But you have Spirit, voice, and Word, and their understanding today. In the Genesis, the Spirit hovered over the deep, hovered over the waters. The voice, God spoke. He said, "Let there be light." This thing, and the Word that made everything. And Jesus is the Word. By him, all things were made. Nothing was made that was, that was made. Everything was made by him. Okay, so, but the voice, the vibration, they're understanding that everything runs on frequency. Everything runs on vibration. And, we know this today. If I had an antenna that I could put up, and if I could catch all the unbelievable, there are probably millions of different frequencies and vibrations and things going on around that I have no clue to. I'm just in this little box, and that's all I can see and hear and taste and touch. This is the thing. This is not all there is. But these three, they're called the number, or they could be, the words could be used. We said spirit, voice, or word, crown, wisdom, or understanding, number, writing, and speech, which and this is where it gets a little more interesting, even into the, because when you really get into the physics of the thing, and I said like, the elements, the periodic table of elements, all these, there are so many math, there are so many, then the creative power, that they know that there's a power, like when atoms are separated or something, and then power is released. All these different, and believe me, I am not the scientist, I'm not doing a good job of portraying the scientific part of this. I can kind of hold into my brain these, I guess it would be a philosophical understanding. I don't see any disconnect between these two types of explanations for the world. I just think that instead of it, today they're trying to make it very clinical and cut and dried, and there's no life in these things. There's not intelligence. See, and this is what the world, no. These are God's created beings. These are the living souls. Remember I told you in the beginning here that these were created beings, and if you read Genesis, then I dare you to do it, because I did it one day, and I was like, oh my gosh. That would be, let me just say that again, because you understand, there is spirit form, which is the highest, the spirit, the wind, the breath of God. These are things, the word before flesh, being the word became flesh. So that means the word had a whole persona, existence. I don't want to use words to trip people up. Before the word Yahushua, which was saying the relief. I mean, there's so many words for him. It came into the flesh, okay? This world of matter, which is really, it's down here, the lowest, we're in the lowest strata of frequency, of vibration, of energy, of power. We're in like matter down here. Oh my gosh. But this gradation of energy, it says that they know that we are biologically connected to every other living thing in the world. We are chemically connected to all molecules on Earth, and we are anatomically connected to all atoms in the universe. So when I was telling God, you can't separate God. You can't separate. You can't put half him here, half him over there. He is in everything. In him, all things hold together. All things, when you listen to Paul had this Hebraic understanding. If you listen to the words he is saying, and even, Jesus, I and the Father are one. A lot of these words, when you really kind of get this understanding, it's so much deeper and so much, but this, what they did was, let me just do, because this is like, okay, so you have, and this is, again, in the mythologies, this is what's so fascinating, because I'm convinced, until be convinced differently, right? Now where I stand, I'm pretty convinced that all these different storylines, if you want to use it, are telling the same story. Even the mythologies, the Greeks and the Romans, and you have this whole mythology of the Titans and the Olympians, and they have a ton of anthropomorphic storyline around them, okay?